You are looking at both topic 1.3 and topic 1.4. Okay, it is no typo that 1.4 is put in front of 1.3 because we're going to cover topic 1.4 first before topic 1.3. Okay, so let me just quickly run through with you what is this topic about and what has it got to do with what we have done so far about tourism. So we started the topic about understanding the different parts of tourism. We used the tourism system, okay, where we learn about the TGR, TDR, and the transit routes. We also learned another way to look at the parts of tourism. We look at how tourism is being produced at the destination. So the tourism production process, creating a tourism product, and is consumed by the tourists. Okay, and we look at these parts, we use it to understand that tourism has been changing a lot over the past 50-60 years, and we have looked at some of these 6 major trends. Also recently talk about what are the reasons that led to these trends. Okay, so based on what we have done so far, you can see that tourism has been changing a lot over the past 50, 60, 70 years. We also see that tourism is not something that is equal throughout the world. Okay, one of the trends that you have realized is that there's more and more diversity, there's more and more variety in who is involved, what are the things they do, and the kind of tourism activities. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to try to make sense of this. Why is tourism so uneven, so diverse in the world, so that we can better understand what tourism is like, what is the nature of tourism, why is it important, so that when we move on to the next part of the topic, about how the trends in tourism led to tourism impact, we can use what we learned about tourism to better understand how come it leads to certain impacts, and then how are we going to manage it due to the nature of tourism. Okay, so that is the purpose of today's goal, and this is why we are teaching topic 1.3 and 1.4 together. All right, so how do we split this? If you were to use a tourism system to make sense of what you're going to learn today, the first part, we're going to look at what happens at TGR. Basically, we are looking at the different types of tourists, and as a result, why there's a variety of tourism activities and the destinations that they visit. Okay, and then the second part, we're going to focus on the destination itself, this topic 1.3, and this is to find out why is it that there's so many different kinds of destination, and what we're going to do about it. Okay, so let's zoom into 1.4. Now, the first part we're going to talk about is Plock's model of tourist behavior. You need not mention the person's name. You don't really need to memorize the model name per se, and you don't really know how it came about. Okay, this is not a history course. What you really need to know is how does this make sense of tourism, and what is it trying to make sense of, and what is it trying to predict. Okay, so Plock's model of tourist behavior came about because when tourism started to grow rapidly and started to change rapidly, a lot of the businessmen, people who's in the tourism industry, is trying to make sense of who are the customers that they are serving. Okay, so Plock studied quite a few people, and then he came to this conclusion, and he summarized it into this model over here. Okay, so I want you to make sense of the model using some of the helping words here from A, B, and C. Okay, can I get you to look at A, B, and C? And I want you to try to think which part of the model is showing A, which part of the model is showing B, and which part of the model is showing C. Pause the video, come to a conclusion before you continue with the video. Okay, done? All right. So humans are generally distributed along the spectrum. As you can see, this is like one spectrum over here, and the y-axis is the number of people. So what is being spread along the spectrum is according to the type of tourist you are. All right. On opposing ends, we have dependable and venturer tourists. So in this model, we are looking at two extreme types of tourists. You can see that there's extreme here, there's extreme here. These are the two main extremes you need to know. All right. So this is what we call, at this extreme, this is what we call the venturers. Or you can see it as it is a part of the word adventurer. Okay, so they just chop it off, adventurer. And at the other end, we have the dependables. Okay, so this model, what you need to know, number one, is that there's two extreme kinds of tourists. You have the adventurers, you have the dependables. And you need to know that based on this bell curve, right, only a very small number are very extreme. Okay, the majority of us is over here, is a big group where most of us are a mixture of either venturer or dependable, to depending on varying degree. Okay, now the majority of us are what we call mid-centric. That means, we are both a mix of dependable and venturer. Okay, and slightly less people tend to be veering to either extreme. This would be near this group, so we call it near venturer. That means they behave more like a venturer than dependable, okay, but not to the full extreme. And of course, over here at this side, we have this group, not as big as mid-centric, not as venturer as the mid-centric people, but still not totally extreme dependable. Okay, so we call them near dependables. So what is this dependable adventurer? So Plock, after he studied people, right, this is his conclusion. He said most of us are a mixture of dependable and venturer, okay? And that will determine the type of tourist we are, all right? So dependable are those who like to do things that is predictable. So you can see it as those who depend on others, depend on what is already done. They tend to go for what is well known. They tend to go to things where many tourists are already there. It's a well-established tourist area. They prefer what is familiar to them, similar to their own culture, similar to their own food. Okay, whereas venturers are those who like adventure and exploration. They avoid touristy areas. They like to go on their own to unknown places, and they like to go to places that's not known for tourism. And they tend to be the kind who are the first tourists there, and they're the ones who establish knowledge about how to go about in engaging tourism in that place. Okay, so I know it sounds very impossible at this time and age. Okay, that how is it possible that there's a place that people don't really know that it is for tourism, or people don't really know, or this place is not really involved in tourism at all, and there's only a few of them that goes there. Yes, such places are very rare now, but then again, we must remember, when was this established? In the 1950s. So in the 1950s, before there was internet, we actually have a lot of travelers who are actually venturous. Okay, I'll tell you more about it later. All right, so you can read, let's go on to page 3. You can read page 3 on your own. You do not need to memorize every single thing. The main thing is you must be able to understand what these two extremes are. Okay, and it is because of the key characteristic that is why they have such spelling patterns, sorts of influence, preference for travel activities and stuff like that. Okay, so before I go into that, I forgot to mention one more thing: directional influence. So you'll see that the graph has this arrow called directional influence. It is not that important, but I'll just explain. So what you're trying to say, when it comes to tourism stuff, who is the one who create the knowledge, create the trends that will influence others to go? Okay, so as mentioned just now, venturers are the ones who find the new places, visit the new places, and then they are the ones who influence those who are more and more dependable to want to eventually go there, because the tourism in these places are more and more established. Okay, so first things first, after you read through, I want you to pause this video and decide for dependable adventurer, what kind of tourism would they prefer? Dependable, since they want to follow others, they're not going to plan it themselves, they prefer what's familiar. Most of the time, they will go for mass tourism and tour packages. Okay, why? Because they need something predictable, something they don't need to plan. They just leave it to the travel agency. They need structure, they need routine. They're not so adventurous. All right, they need things that has been established and planned for them. Well, as for the venturer, they are the opposite. They would prefer niche tourism. Niche means things that is very specialized. Only a few people like it. Why is it that they prefer niche tourism? Well, because niche tourism usually involves less tourists, and it's usually happening at places that is less developed for tourism. Okay, so it fit the kind of travel patterns that they want, which is going for unique stuff, which is going for things that is not quite well known to other tourists. Okay, so because this is the kind of tourism they prefer, what would their travel look like? Okay, so I'm going to give you a few descriptors. It is not all the descriptors, but it's just some descriptors for you to answer. Okay, first things first, the preference to stay in international hotel chains. What do you mean international hotel chains? That means these are companies that open many hotels in many countries. Okay, so you can think of it like, in terms of accommodation, this is like the McDonald's. Okay, so you have companies like Hyatt, Mandarin Oriental. Which type of tourists would prefer to stay in international hotel chains? If you have chosen dependables, you are correct. Okay, because they are looking for something familiar, they're not going to go for something that is adventurous and new. Okay, next one. the preference to stay with local families. They may, let's say they're visiting a coastal area, then they may go to a fishing village and ask locals to whether they can stay over. Okay, they may pay them a small fee. What kind of tourists prefer this? Okay, so yes, those of you who choose adventurer, you're correct. Well, this is not predictable. This is not familiar. So it's something that adventurers will want. Next one follows package tours. All right, it's already talked about before. This is what the dependable ones. How about exploring and plan their own itinerary? And usually they like to go to places that is little information available about the place that they want to visit. Okay, yep, this is done by the adventurers. They prefer that. Only eats at places that serve cuisine from their own culture, and especially at touristy areas. Okay, so this is what the dependables want. And lastly, tries local cuisine. Well, it's quite clear-cut. This is what the adventurers will prefer because it's not familiar to them. How I remember this model first came out in 1950s and 60s. So what's happening there at that point in time? Actually, at that point in time, there's a lot of backpackers and people traveling their own. So even though there is no internet, what they do is that they actually took the courage and travel to many places in the world. Some of you may have heard of this series of books called Lonely Planet. You must see these blue book covers in libraries in Singapore. Okay, so it's actually started by this couple. What happened was that they were backpacking in the 60s and 70s. Okay, so they go to places that is not popular among mass tourists, tour packages and stuff like that. So what do? The community of backpackers, what they do is that they will exchange tips. Okay, so when they go to these countries like Asia where it's not familiar, they will write down experiences and advice, and when they meet other venturer tourists, they would exchange this information. Okay, so this couple, they eventually actually compiled their advice into guidebooks, which is the Lonely Planet you see today. Okay, so this is how it all started. Without internet, they really went to places that haven't really developed tourism, and they visit places that's not popular, usually in Asia, and then from there they write their own advice, and they exchange it with other venturer tourists when they are traveling, and this is how they form guidebooks eventually. Okay, so we are done with this part here, this plots model, to understand the different kinds of tourists. Okay, and then from there we also understand why is it that there's different kinds of tourism involved in the world, because different tourists have different preferences. Okay, so we're done with this part. Now we're going to look at the model to understand tourist destination regions. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next page. All right, same thing. You don't need to know how it came about. It's just for you to better understand, and you don't need to know the person's name. Okay, you don't really need to know memorize the model name, but you should roughly know what is it about. So we have the plots model to understand how tourists are like. People who in the tourism industry, how do we go about meeting their needs, how we go about selling things to them, and we can use that to understand why there is a diversity in tourism. Okay, another way to look at the diversity in tourism is to look at the destination regions itself. Okay, so how this model came about was in the 1980s, as more and more places have been involved in tourism, they start to wonder, what would my business turn out to be like? Okay, or countries and destinations may start to think, what is tourism in my place going to be like? What do I need to do? What do I need to prepare for? What do I need to anticipate? How do I make sure that, I can run tourism into the future? This professor, he actually studied quite a few destinations and he followed certain business model, and he came out with this tourism area life cycle model. Okay, so he basically assumes that most tourist destination will go through these stages of evolution. It's just that at any one time, let's say in the 1980s, some may be in stage 3, some may be in stage 1, some may be in stage 5, some may be in stage 6. Everywhere is at a different stage. So that is why there is such a diverse spread of the kind of destinations. Okay, so he has 7 stages. Unfortunately, you must know the names of these stages. All right, so I know we have the answer at the back. Okay, now we are at page 4. I know there's answers at page 5 and page 6. I would like you to hold yourself. Okay, instead of memorizing blindly, I want you to basically sorry, I forgot to mention. All right, now you might see this SLS and in other internet sources. Some may be wider, some may be thinner. Doesn't matter. Okay, it roughly follows this shape. That's good enough. Okay, so if I compress this is what you will see in your notes. Okay, so the name of the 7 stages, I know you have to answer them back. Let's not go into there. I want to spend a bit more energy and brain power to process and do linkages. When you do such linkages, you will remember better. Okay, so the name of the 7 stages arranged in alphabetical order. I want you to read the descriptor of the stage and decide which name belongs to which stage. Okay, have you decided? All right, so let me walk through this with you. The first stage over here, okay, at this stage, at the start, in the past, where tourism haven't started yet, okay, it is a place that does not attract tourists, and usually only a few tourists is engaged in it. And the locals, their main job is not tourism. They just go on to their day-to-day life. Maybe the tourists may, every now and then, may visit them, visit the place, and then maybe pay the locals to provide a bit of food, provide accommodation. Okay, but their main role for the locals is other jobs. All right. So since this is something that is done by early explorers, we call this stage exploration. Then the next stage, all right, as word get around, a bit more tourists start to come over, and then some locals say that, hey, maybe I can do a side job. I can maybe set up a proper shop, proper cafe, or proper restaurant, or proper accommodation. Okay, maybe I can consistently rent out a room for tourists to stay in. Okay, so this is where the locals, instead of just doing their day-to-day job, some may start to switch totally to tourism, or some may start to switch part-time, and they start to get involved in the tourism industry. So as the name suggests, this is what we call the involvement stage. Okay, I've already given the answer for the next one. Well, I think most of you choose development. So stage 1, stage 2, as you can see, very little tourists are involved. The growth is quite slow actually. But when you go on to stage 3, the growth explodes. It's one of the fastest growth. Okay, so why do we call this the development stage? Because this is where the locals or the government may start to say that, hey, this place, it looks like it's attractive to tourists. They will put in money, they will put in the manpower and resource to actually develop the place for tourism. Now, when I say develop the place, it's not that they are making the houses better, maybe provide electricity, water for villagers or what. No, okay? We are looking at the development of the tourism industry. So maybe they will start to build hotels, maybe they will start to build tourist attractions and stuff like that. Okay, so this is where the tourism industry is growing the fastest. So the number of tourists will grow very rapidly. All right, but of course, all good things in life doesn't last. Okay, so it will start to slow down. The TDR become a quite established destination. So it will not be a new thing to attract a lot more tourists, but the growth will start to slow. You can see that the curve from very steep become more and more gentle. Okay, so this one is a bit tough, all right? But basically, it's trying to talk about how the destination is consolidating what they're trying to do in tourism. So this is what we call the consolidation stage. Okay, and then at this stage, so it slows down, and then eventually it will reach a point where it has attracted the most number of tourists possible. Okay, and this is where it may start to become a bit boring, no longer so new and attractive to tourists. So the numbers may actually start to decline very, very slightly. Okay, so as you can see, the changes are like very little, almost the same. So almost the same, nothing new, nothing growing. This is what we call stagnation. Okay, stagnate means that it's not changing, right? Like stagnant water is not moving. So this is what we are seeing. Not much movement, not much growth, and starting to decline slightly. Okay, so Butler is saying that at this stage, all destinations must start to make a decision. All right, do they let it be, or will they do something to attract more tourists? Okay, so if they let it be, it becomes less and less attractive, it's no longer so well maintained, then less tourists want to visit that location. This is where it starts to decline. Okay, or if they start to do something about it, they attract more tourists. So bring in life, make things better is what we call rejuvenation. Okay, so these 7 stages names you must know, but as you can see, if you have a rough sense of what it means, you will be able to link what is the name of the stages. All right, so if you go on to the next page, page 5, I have highlighted to you in the key characteristics what are some of the words that help you name the stages. Okay, now these arrows, I know it looks very weird. It is trying to mirror this curve that you see, so that when you study this page, it is easier for you. All right, there is no need to memorize the main thing, everything. The main thing is you need to understand what's going on. Okay, so another way to present it, I can use pictures. So first stage exploration, only 1 or 2 tourists. These are all local shops. Locals are just getting on with their life. They're not really working in tourism at all. All right, involvement. is where you can see from here to here, maybe this house owner start to run a motel or maybe a small hotel. Okay, you see people set up cafes over here at the beach, start to provide services here. All right, so a bit more tourists come in already, and the locals start to get involved in tourism by providing services to the tourists. Okay, and then maybe the government, this is where they say, oh, there's a potential, so then they will put in money and rapidly develop this place. Right, so they may also attract investors to open hotels, then they may expand their businesses, maybe expand the local shops, provide transportation. They may even build, let's say, resorts or airports. Okay, so that a lot more tourists start to come over. So you can see from exploration, hardly any tourists, involvement, more tourists, and a lot more tourists suddenly in development. Okay, and consolidation, you see the tourists still growing, but not as fast as before. And you can see that the rate of development is slower. So previously it's like so little things, suddenly a lot more things. Okay, that's meant for tourists, but now you can see that it slows down just a few more things, slight adjustments to accommodate the increase in tourists. All right, and then stagnation, as you can see, some things start to decline already. All right, this hotel start to decline. Okay, this supermarket, less people maintain because there's so many tourists coming in, so it start to decline. Okay, so it's not a full drop. It's just like it's about the maximum that it can take, but drop slightly. Okay, so this is where they must decide what's next. So if they do nothing about it, it will decline. So from so many people coming in to less people, because it is not so well maintained, people don't care, it's not so attractive anymore, and places may start to close. Okay, or if the destination decided that let's rejuvenate this, let's do something about it. So like for example, from supermarket, I make it supermarket. All right, hotel, instead of 2-star, I upgrade it into 5-star. Okay, instead of just a small open air shop, I change it into fully air conditioned and things like that. I build new water park. So that will then attract even more tourists and prevent a decline. Okay, so that's essentially what the models are about. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video. I want you to quickly decide what kind of tourism will involve at different stages. Okay, using what you have learned, mass tourism, niche tourism, and adventurous and stuff like that. What kind of tourism will be involved at this location? So exploration involvement, naturally, as we mentioned, is for those who are more adventurous, and usually it's definitely not whole groups. It will be individuals or in smaller groups. Okay, development consolidation, where it starts to attract a lot of people. How do I get a lot of people to be attracted? I must, of course, offer a bit more mass tourism, and at the part where it's the most number of tourists. Why? It's because this is where a lot of mass tourism has been involved. Okay, and of course it may be a case where more tourists than locals actually. Okay, so what I've talked about verbally is actually mentioned in the text over here, so I will not go through here in detail anymore. Okay, you can actually infer this part from the tourism development. And of course, I've given you one example. I know textbook give different examples at different stages to show the diversity, but the original intent of the model is how a certain destination will change over time and evolve over time. Okay, so this is basically for destinations to see where they are and then decide what is the next action they need to take. Okay, especially at the stagnation stage, those who are at the stagnation stage, what's next? Because if you don't do anything, it will decline. And if you do something right, it will rejuvenate. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples, real life examples, and I want you to tell me which stage of tourism development this is at. Okay, Maya Bay is actually one of the most famous island and beaches in Thailand, South Thailand, and it has come to a lot of attention since early 2000. Okay, now so this was a scene from a movie called The Beach. Maya Bay was actually very unknown, so the people who make this movie, The Beach, they actually found out from venturer tourists that there's such a beach. So that's why you see hardly anybody. And I'm going to show you a scene from the movie. I want you to tell me which stage of the life cycle, tourism life cycle, okay, these 7 stages, does this belong to? Okay, so which stage of the model is Maya Bay at as depicted in this part of the movie? Now, some of you may say exploration because you don't see any tourism development at all. Some of you may say involvement because there's not a few tourists, there's quite a few more tourists. Okay, but definitely it's not a development because it's not a case where it's a lot of people. All right, I can accept either, but I'm not so inclined to choose involvement because there's no evidence that the locals are involved in the tourism industry. Okay, so yes, this is what apparently Maya Bay was one of the best kept secrets from the world for many, many years, and only a few adventurous tourists actually know it. Okay, now what happened was that once this movie was out, well, so many people in the world said, "Whoa, such a beautiful beach," and then the local government also see that, a lot of people like to visit this beach. So when this was shown when I was in Sec 3, oh my gosh, that sounds so long ago. That was in year 2000. Okay, eventually it became more and more popular, and this is what Maya Bay looked like. Okay, so I want you to tell me Maya Bay is at which stage of the tourism development model based on the evidence that you see over here. Okay, so some of you might say that it's development because it's a rapid increase. Yeah, I can accept it. Some may say consolidation. Well, we can't really tell whether is it development or consolidation. I can accept either one. Some of you might start to say that it's stagnation. Say, maybe it is already peaked already. This is the maximum we can hold because there's only so many space in the beach. Okay, I can also accept that. So it can be any of these three stages. And which stage is it exactly? We probably need more information. Okay, which one is this? All right. Then what happened was that since there's so many tourists over here, they cannot accommodate more. And then people start to say, hey, let's not go to this beach, all right? Yes, it's very pretty, but it's so crowded with so many tourists, not so attractive anymore. Okay, so they actually decided, the government actually in 2018 decided to close down the bay because a lot of the damages is happening because of tourism, because of tourists. Okay, so they know that the place is beginning to decline in early 2010s, and then they realize that if they don't do anything about it, the destination will decline. Okay, because less and less people want to go there because it's so crowded, it's so damaged, and they know that this will not attract any more tourists. Okay, so they decided to close it to repair the place, for the natural habitats to grow back again, the environment to grow back again. So you can see from this clip. Okay, let me just run through quickly. After they closed the bay in 2018, great, the ecosystems actually restored and restored its beauty. Okay, so actually the sharks actually start to come back that was missing because of the food of the tourists.
What followed, though, was mass tourism that brought about 5,000 tourists to this very small bay every single day. And over the years, its environmental condition has deteriorated. The coral reefs were destroyed and fish disappeared. And that pushed the Thai government to close Maya Bay indefinitely to tourists.
Okay, so it has since reopened actually, and they will close it regularly to attract more. And what they see is that people start to appreciate the beauty of Maya Bay again. Okay, so there's a bit of a rejuvenation because of what they have done. Okay, so let me show you more examples. Actually, this was done pre-COVID, and then it was delayed, and it has restarted again. Okay, so actually pre-COVID, our two integrated resorts, the one in Sentosa, RWS, and MBS, they will actually have plans to expand. Okay, MBS is going to build a 4th tower, all right, with more facilities, more hotel rooms. And RWS in Sentosa is going to build a new theme park called Nintendo World. Okay, which stage of the tourism development do you think this is? Okay, so since we are trying to do new things, all right, to attract more tourists, it's actually we are entering rejuvenation. Some of you are thinking, are we at stagnation already? Is it that we are at the stage where, we do not have even more tourists, that's why we need to build more? That's not really the case, but because of this model, you can see that those at the consolidation and development stage will know that one day they will reach stagnation and decline. So some destinations can rejuvenate in advance to prepare for the day and to prevent them from stagnating. Okay, so that's what Singapore did actually, so that we're now entering in a form of rejuvenation. Okay, now one last thing for you, one last concept. I forgot to print this, I forgot to include this in the notes. Can I get you to add one line, squeeze in one line at the bottom of page 5, okay, or at the top also? I'd like to bring this concept of carrying capacity. Okay, so what is carrying capacity? In a context, in a neutral context, carrying capacity just means the maximum number of people I can take before there is negative consequence. Okay, in the context of tourism, we're looking at the carrying capacity of tourist destinations. That means the destination, what's the maximum number of people they can take before there's negative consequence. Okay, so like what we saw just now about Maya Bay, because they take in too many tourists and the natural environment start to degrade, the animals start to die off, it's a sign that there's negative consequences. It's a sign that the carrying capacity has been exceeded. Okay, so let's say the classroom has 45 carrying capacity of 45 students. If I put in 10 students, it's comfortable, there's no negative consequence. But if I want to put in 50 students, it becomes too crowded, not enough tables and chairs, then that's where there's a lot of negative consequence. Okay, so from using this graph, I want you to quickly tell me what is the what can be the carrying capacity at each stage of the model. Okay, so I want you to quickly guess, and I will go through. So let's go through exploration stage, where there is no tourism facilities, there's no one involved in tourism, people are not trained in tourism. The carrying capacity is very small. Okay, because there's no accommodation, there's food is not being imported just to serve tourists. So in terms of tourism, the carrying capacity is very small. All right. Now at the next stage, where involvement stage, where some tourists start to cater to tourists, the capacity is slowly increasing. Okay, so you can fill it up over here yourself, and the rest of it. And then when the government starts to develop the place, all right, a lot more resources are pumping, a lot more businesses and facilities are meant to serve tourists. This is where the carrying capacity will increase rapidly. Okay, and then when it starts to consolidate, it's still an increase, just that it is not as fast. The growth is not as fast as the development stage. Okay, how fast the tourism can grow is limited by its carrying capacity. So I can have a lot of people wanting to visit the place, but if they cannot hold so many, the growth will be limited. Okay, and of course stagnation, this is usually a sign where the carrying capacity has exceeded. That is why it's degrading. That is why people don't find it attractive anymore. Okay, and then of course if it declines, the carrying capacity will drop, and if it rejuvenates, the carrying capacity will increase. Okay, so let me just do a conclusion. We have learned two models. Okay, so today is very straightforward about these two models. One is trying to understand tourist behavior, and one is trying to understand how destinations will evolve and change. Okay, what you need to know for this model, the distribution, basically you need to know the two extremes and the characteristics. Right, meat-centric, you need to understand the concept, but you don't need to know the term. For the Butler life cycle model, you need to know these 7 stages, okay, and you need to understand how tourism destination change over time. Okay, so let's summarize these two together. I want you to guess at each stage of the tourism destination, okay, what kind of tourists will I see over there? What are the main kinds of tourists? Will I see purely dependables? Will I see purely adventurous? Will I see the meat-centric, the near-dependables, near-adventurous? Okay, I want you to quickly decide before I share with you. What do you think? Okay, exploration, as I mentioned before, it is not known to most people. Okay, so this is actually where you will find the adventurous who will visit there. And of course, at the consolidation and stagnation, especially stagnation, you will see a lot more dependables. Okay, likewise at the consolidation stage as well. All right, so from here to here, you will find a mixture. Okay, involvement is still not that familiar. The locals just do a side business or using whatever they have. It's still mainly adventurous. Okay, sorry, I forgot to put meat-centric also. Okay, so all the dependables, their dependables to meat-centric will be mostly here. But the earlier stages is mostly adventurous, and development, you have a mixture in both. All right, so but you have a mix, but you see a decline in the adventurous, but then you will see more meat-centric, and dependables. Okay, so this is not something that you need to go and memorize, but it is something for you to, when you put these two together, you realize that you study less things when you see the connection. Okay, so I hope you have a good time learning the two main models, and there's questions in the Google form for you to apply your learning. All right, see you.